Welcome to HolaCRAZY. So we're Blue Spark, I'm Rick Cecil, and this is
Ashleigh Thevenet.
We're going to talk about our adventures in self-governance, the process that we've kind of gone through over the last, I don't know, since last January. So we've gone through this, we'll talk about our adventures here. We've adopted something called Holacracy, and just all of our crazy adventures over the last year and a half, because it's been quite an adventure now. Not actually doing that.
All right. So
what?
So Holacracy, you may not know what it is. It is a new way of running an organization that removes power from a management hierarchy, and it distributes it across clear roles, which can then be executed autonomously and without a micromanaging boss. So it is a different organizational structure than your kind of traditional top-down management with command and control. So that is the short version. Obviously, we're going to be talking about it for the next 40 minutes, so there's more. So then the question is, why would we want to do this? And there, the answer is that anarchy doesn't really scale. So before we adopted Holacracy, we were and still are a relatively small company, and we had a pretty disorganized structure. We didn't really have a defined management hierarchy. Every person had their own role. We had developers and UX and a designer, and there was sales and a PM, and we all worked within those roles, but nobody was really telling us what to do. So we didn't have that type of traditional structure that I mentioned a bit earlier. We were just kind of disorganized. We're all doing our thing and working together, and we were small enough that worked. But we kind of realized that if we wanted to grow, which we do, that we needed to have a little bit more process in place. There needed to be some process, some actual systems, some formal organization that would allow everybody to do their thing, but know who was supposed to be doing what and who was responsible for what. So
we were pretty much just an organized anarchy before. So we're thinking, hey, what do we need to do to grow, to put these systems in place that will allow us to scale the company? Oligarchy, traditional style, where you have a CEO has a vice president has directors have managers, and then there's finally you. Right? And that's not really fun. It does offer process, it does offer a lot of benefits, but it's not us, right? It's just not who we were, and there's so it's all sorts of politics, waiting around who has what, who's doing what. If I do this, will they be offended by whatever? Progress is slow because I have to get all the different departments that I don't have any connection to on board, because they're going to be offended by this decision that I make. That's not the kind of company we wanted to build, and we would very quickly, I think, hit a ceiling on just how far you could go with that scale and try to maintain the culture that we wanted to.
Now, you're a company that develops websites for clients?
Yes. So, what we really wanted to do
so we wanted to create a culture of empowerment. As we said, we're a small agency, and we're a pretty tight-knit team. Most of the people on our team have been with the company for at least 3 years, but many of us, it's upwards of 5. So we wanted to maintain that strong culture that we had, while fostering a culture of empowerment. So the question is, though, how do you get that kind of culture? If your empowerment is coming from somebody else, if it's your boss who told you, hey, go do this, you can do this, then you're not really empowered. You've just been told you can do something by somebody. And if somebody else has the authority to stop you from doing whatever you're doing, then you're not really empowered either. So we really wanted to find an organizational structure that would allow us to build a company of true equals, where we were all empowered, and we are all a community of partners. So that kind of explains why we thought we needed this change from anarchy to something else. At the time, we didn't really know what else was. We didn't know what the answer was. So, how?
Right. How do you do this? So at the time, so if we go back, I guess to January of 2015, our founder, Michael Tucker, kind of pulled a group of us together. We were a small company, and he actually pulled almost half the company into let's do this retreat, because pretty much this was, I need help. That was his phrase. Like, I think I see opportunities for growth. I've gotten us this far. Everybody feels like I was the user experience director and I knew what I needed to do, but inside this bubble, if I saw anything else that needed to get done, I wasn't sure. Like, was somebody else doing it? I may have wanted to do it, but I wasn't sure, so I stuck with my bubble and did what I needed to do inside my job description, right? But we needed something more. We need people working outside their job description. So I need help. So we did this leadership retreat. We talked all sorts of stuff. And really, a lot of great stuff come out of it, but we still didn't know what we needed or how to do it. But shortly thereafter, I read a book called Intertwined by Peter Morville. Really interesting just how our lives connect with just everything in our lives is so interconnected. Strongly recommend it. And he had a short chapter on Holacracy in there. Now this says Intertwined. Yeah, INTERTWINGLED. And Ashleigh always makes fun of me every time I say it. It's not a real word, but
Who was the author?
Peter Morville. And so I need help. Yeah. So I read the book. It was a Holacracy. I did some research on it. It all sounded great. So I went around and I convinced everybody that I've got this really good idea. We're going to adopt Holacracy, and we're going to have circles, and we're going to be equals, and it's going to be awesome. So that's what we did.
So Rick made his pitch, and we all bought in. Great, we have the solution. We're going to do Holacracy. Let's do this. And we had kind of a meeting. It was actually when we were all in LA for DrupalCon last year, where we all sat down. We introduced the idea of Holacracy. This is what we're going to do, and we're all really excited, really on board. Like, let's do it. Let's figure this out. So part of Holacracy, which we'll explain a little bit more in detail about how it works and what these terms are in a minute. But part of it is there are circles. So circles, kind of think of it roughly like your traditional department, right? So we defined our circles. We sat down in LA and we were like, okay, we need these circles, we need 6 circles, and then within those circles, we need roles. So role would kind of be like your traditional position, but not quite, because most people are going to have multiple roles. So we also defined all of our roles, and we ended up with 6 circles and a lot of roles. And then we assigned ourselves to circles and roles, and we're all excited and really into this new idea that we have. We're changing our company. Yeah, we're moving forward. We're all taking on this responsibility, doing all these things that we see that we've been wanting to do, and we got a little over enthusiastic, because what happens in Holacracy is it is self-organized. There is structure to it, and each circle needs to have its own specific meetings, which again we'll get into the details of how that works in a few minutes. But so each circle has a weekly meeting. So if you're in 6 circles, then you're in like 6 meetings. And since several people had assigned themselves to like 5 different circles, they want to help with everything, and they have like 5 different roles. Our schedules became really crazy because we had all these Holacracy meetings, and on top of it, we were just adopting it, so we weren't really used to the structure and how those meetings worked. So they weren't running as efficiently as they do once you get into it and you're kind of in the flow of Holacracy. It was a bit of a mess. It was a crazy schedule and too many meetings.
And basically, I'm running around trying to reassure people it'll work. We'll get into the groove. We'll figure it out. Meetings will get better, but it didn't. And basically, that structure worked for about 4 weeks before it just we all just threw our hands up like this isn't going to work. So. people weren't able to get their work done. Nobody knew what anybody else was doing. The meetings weren't happening. I mean, imagine like when you first learn a game, right? You're learning kind of a complex board game like Settlers of Catan, right? You're reading the rules and you're doing the thing. You're going back to the it's jerky, right? You can't get it. But once you know the rules, you know the rules. So I was hoping to get to that point. We know the rules, things will be smooth, and that just didn't happen. So after about 4 weeks, we did a reboot. I set everybody down and I was like, this is not working. Fortunately, too, Ben Robertson, the guy who kind of came up with this whole idea of Holacracy, wrote a book. And wrote a book just like right after, it came out right after we got back from LA. I read the book, I listened to the audio tape, I read it, I watched a bunch of webinars. And I learned a lot more about Holacracy and I saw all the things we were doing wrong with it. So I was like, let's start completely over. Let's go back and let's do this the way like he kind of outlined the step-by-step process in the book. And so this time too, key things would be we'd have one circle. We're a small company, so one circle, that means only one group set of meetings for the circle. And then at that time too, I also did a bunch of interviews. I went around to the team and I talked to folks one-to-one, using my user experience background, user research. I was like, hey, tell me what you do, tell me what you enjoy. I just want to hear like what's going on with the company, what's right with the company, what's the company not doing that we should be doing, like all these really interesting questions. Got all sorts of great feedback. So then,
so the interviews then were designed to really define our roles, but also assign them. So making sure that everybody was assigned to a role, not just volunteering for like all of the roles. But roles that were fit to them, to their interests, to their areas of expertise, their skill sets. And so, we decided with this reboot that it was going to be different, and it was. It actually works the second time we tried this.
Great.
So now we'll kind of explain how Holacracy works. So it really starts then.
It starts with the Constitution. So this is what we talked about empowerment before, right? So we talked about, in a traditional oligarchy, your empowerment comes from your boss, and their empowerment comes from their boss, and all the way up the chain. As long as you have a good king, a graceful monarch, everybody can go about doing their thing. But once you kind of stop that, somebody comes in or at any point says, no, you can't do that anymore, you just can't. So one of the big early mistakes we made was just jumping in and saying, let's do circles and roles without adopting the Constitution. And this is actually turns out to be a pretty key thing, is Holacracy is based on the Constitution. And everybody's power and authority and what you're supposed to be doing and all that comes from the Constitution, just like, the best democracies in the world, you start with a Constitution. So it's not like a monarch saying that this is the way things are and they can change their mind whenever. You have rules that have to be followed and it's defined. So you start with the Constitution. So that's what we did. We adopted the Constitution. And then, as part of the Constitution, what really kind of flows from that are these idea of roles. That's almost like the key part of Holacracy is this idea of a role. Now, role is different than me. I'm not my role. Role is a part. I have like 7 roles. Some of the company people on the team only have 1 role, right? And they're busy, and that's great. I have 6 or 7, and it works, But I'm not my role. I'm the soul. People are the soul. They're the heart, the soul of the culture, soul of the company, and then the roles are the heart. The roles are what I do. I'm energizing a role to embrace my autonomy or authority to act in different ways. Ashleigh, you want to talk about?
Yeah, let's look at an example of a role. So it will come back. There are 3 specific parts. There you go. To every role. So what we're looking at here is our marketing and PR role. We have, I guess, maybe like 20 roles. We'll look at the full circle in a minute. We have another slide that shows that. And they're not all this traditional. Marketing and PR seems like a position that there would be at pretty much any company. This is just a good example because it's easy to wrap your head around, but we have other ones like resource planner, there's event controller, there's partner. So there's different, less traditionally defined roles as well. But so each role has 3 distinct parts of it. There's the purpose. So the purpose is, what is the reason for this role? Why do we need it? What is this role supposed to do for the organization? And then it has a domain. So that is company property that role controls. So in this case, marketing and PR controls our company website. They have total control over that. And then there are accountabilities. So accountabilities are essentially all of the responsibilities of that role. These are their specific responsibilities, the things that they are supposed to be doing, and that you can look to a person filling a role to do. So if somebody is not actually taking care of all of their accountabilities, that is something that you may bring up in one of the specific Holacracy meetings that we'll get into in a minute. You would bring that up as a tension that you're not meeting these accountabilities. These are part of your role, and that is something that as the holder of a role, you are accountable for. So the roles then are organized within circles.
Yeah, circles are essentially ways to organize roles. And circles essentially are a type of role themselves. Circles have a purpose. They can have domains and they can have accountabilities. And you can put roles into circles, and the roles in those circles act on behalf of that circle. Right? The great thing too about this, that's interesting to think about, interesting to explore, is that circles can be created through an act of governance, and they can be disbanded with an act of governance. It's not like a department. You think about a traditional department reorg, and how much stress and just people get laid off when you talk about reorganization, right? This is more along the lines of, hey, we want to do this, we'll try this week, and if it works for a few weeks, great, and if it doesn't, all right, we'll move some stuff around, and we'll take away that circle and move the roles around in different ways. As it turns out, and this is one of the key points in the book that I recommend reading, if you're a small company, you should have one circle, which makes a lot of sense in hindsight. So we have one of the key things that we did the second time around is we have one circle. This is kind of our organizational structure right now. So GCC just stands for General Company Circle with blue spark. You see we have a lot of different roles inside here. The green roles are roles that we've created to kind of energize the purpose of the company. The white circles there are roles that, so a role gets created through governance. We'll talk about governance in a minute, but it can be created through governance. And then it's up to the lead link to assign those roles. Lead link is a special role. A lot of times you might think of it akin to the manager for a department, but the lead link doesn't manage anything. I can't tell anybody what to do. I'm the lead link for our company here. I can't tell anybody what to do. I can't say, hey, Ashleigh, you're the project manager. I need you to do X and Y and make these priorities, and Ashleigh will just laugh in my face because I don't have that authority. I make sure if I see Ashleigh or somebody might come to me and say, Ashleigh's not doing X. I could go to Ashleigh and talk to her about it. She still doesn't have to do X because we're partners, we're equals. And then other people can raise that again in governance. We'll talk about that in a minute. There's a couple other special roles too. Lead links are assigned whenever you adopt the Holacracy, and it's kind of a lifetime appointment until I step down. And the idea that I have in place anyway is we get to a point where everything's kind of running smoothly, and then I step down and somebody else steps up. Holacracy 1, the organization that kind of started this whole thing, they rotate through their lead links every 6 or 7 months, and it's just voluntary. They just voluntarily step down, and when you're stepping down, you appoint the next one. We have other roles, secretary and facilitator. Facilitator is exactly what it sounds like. They manage the meetings that we have. And secretary is not just the one kind of documenting what's kind of happening in the meetings, but they're also the ones interpreting the Constitution. So if we have any question about, hey, should we do it this way or that way, then we go to the secretary, hey, can you read that part of the Constitution and give us an interpretation here? Facilitator and secretary are elected roles, right? So they're the ones that are, so the whole team gets together, there are nominations, and they get elected to their roles. Of course, you can decline the election, and you can resign from a role at any time. So, but yeah, that's basically our circle structure and kind of the key parts of the roles, lead links, facilitator, and secretary.
So we mentioned earlier that there are meetings in Holacracy. If you were looking to maybe adopt Holacracy as a way of getting rid of meetings, that's not going to happen. there are meetings that are required. The good news is that once everybody is, used to Holacracy and knows what they're doing, the meetings can go very quickly, and you can actually resolve a lot of different agenda items in half an hour.
It probably took us 6 months to get to that point where the meetings were running smoothly. Tacticals, you pick up on those pretty quick. We'll talk about those in a second. But then government, it does take a while to get used to.
So there are two specific types of meetings that happen within Holacracy, and they're both highly structured. They follow a set agenda, a set structure, and the facilitator and the secretary are working to run the meeting smoothly. The secretary is taking the notes, and the facilitator is making sure that the interactions that are happening at the right time. So you cannot interject when somebody is reporting on something. If you have an interjection, if you have an opinion, if you have something to say about something that somebody else is saying, there's a specific time, and that would happen in the open agenda. So what happens, the first type of meeting is a tactical meeting. Tactical meetings normally happen every week. It's self-organizing, so if you were in a company that realized that you needed twice a week, that could happen. If you only need every other week, that can also happen. We do it every week, every Monday morning. So what happens in a tactical meeting is it's kind of all hands on deck. Everybody who is within the circle attends. And we first go through metrics. So metrics are key performance indicators that we have defined as a group as being important things that we want to report on in these meetings. So those were defined in our first tactical meetings. We figured out what numbers do we want to be hearing about, just to kind of get a general idea of health of the company, health of projects, how are we doing over the past week. So we first report on metrics. That normally is very quick. It's just sharing the numbers. And then the second thing that we would report on is projects. So projects are defined in tactical meetings. We'll get to how in just a second. But once a project has been defined, it becomes part of the open agenda for a tactical meeting, where you go through your metrics and then you go through the list of all the open projects. And you'd say, Rick, you had this project, what's the status update there? And the idea is not for Rick to tell us everything that he's done in the past week on his project. Nobody needs that level of detail, because Rick is energizing his role. He is in leading this project that he has been assigned by the team. So we don't, it's not that we don't care, but we don't need that level of detail to know everything that he's done. We just need to know, have you made progress or no? If not, maybe we need to figure out a way to help him be able to make progress. But it's really just a question of, is this project moving forward? So you go through the list of projects, by all team members, and then after that, we move on to the open agenda. So open agenda is anybody in the meeting can add an item to the agenda. There's a website that we use for this that's specifically designed for these type of meetings. So you just type in your agenda item, it gets added, and we work through the different items. So agenda items can be attention that you have. It can be, this thing isn't getting done and it's blocking me from doing what I need to do. So you could be bringing that up, or it could be something that you just need to announce. So, for example, I could say, hey, MidCamp is coming up in a week. Who's planning on attending? Just quick get a show of hands from everybody in the meeting who's attending. So agenda items can be opened for discussion or not. And it is a person who put that item on the agenda who decides whether they are opening this up for discussion for everybody or not, or if they're just wanted to make an announcement, had something that they needed to say, had a reaction maybe to a project update that we heard earlier. This would be the place to kind of, anything goes in the agenda. We build the agenda in the meeting, and anybody can contribute to it with essentially anything. And what will come out of the agenda items are either projects. So we may say, okay, that's a really great tension, Rick. This thing that isn't getting done, we really need to figure that out. Why don't, you're going to have a project to work on this. We're going to assign it to you. It's going to go on the project list. And it's up to you now to figure out how to run that project. So you can go and work with whoever else in the company you need to, get their ideas, their collaboration on it, and work out this project and see it to completion. And you can report back on it in future tacticals if anything comes up where you realize there's a tension, you need other things. That can also go into the open agenda in a future tactical. So either a project is going to come out of it, or the other thing is you may realize that this tension, this agenda item, needs to have a specific company-wide policy adopted around it, or maybe this thing that isn't getting done, it's actually because it's a role that nobody has. We haven't created this role and we need to. Those are things that cannot happen in a tactical meeting. If a policy or a role need to be defined or adopted, then that's what's going to happen in the second type of meeting, which is governance.
Yeah, so HolaCRAZY really differentiates. One of the great, I think, strengths of it is a differentiation between operations and governance, right? I think even in oligarchies, that distinction is muddled, right? Managers are responsible both a bit for organizing their department and making sure people are doing what they need to do, and that's not everybody thinks in those terms. Not everybody thinks in that distinction. So governance, so technical is operations. It's an operational type of meeting, make sure everything's moving smoothly. Governance, on the other hand, is a governance type of meeting. Very straightforward there, right? And governance is a very strict structure. It's there to evaluate and assess and determine, do we need to modify, do we need to adopt a new policy, is there a new system we need to put in place, is there something broken about the way the organization is working now? And broken necessarily isn't like, it's bad, maybe something's missing. Maybe there's a couple of roles that are in conflict with each other. There's a overlap where we didn't expect overlap. So these are called tensions, right? Just anybody can raise a tension. Tensions are important, equal, right? If I raise a tension, if Ashleigh raises tension versus Michael is the founder, it's all treated equally. There's no distinction between, who's raising that tension. If I raise a tension, it will get addressed in some way, some fashion. So how it works, how a governance meeting works is everybody comes together, you have an open agenda, everybody lists their tensions. The facilitator will call on the first person, describe their tension and present the proposal to fix the tension, right? It could be the creation of a new role, the adoption of a policy. I could say, I need Ashleigh to do this. I expect her to do this, but she's not. And I look at her role, and Ashley's like, yeah, it's not there, so I'm going to create a new accountability on her role as project manager so that she will have to start doing that. So I'm proposing that I'm going to put a new accountability on the role of project manager. So I present my proposal, the team has a chance to respond and ask questions, and Ashley says, this is stupid, I don't want to do this, but it doesn't matter because the proposal is going, we're going to move it along. I could choose to update based on all the feedback. I don't have to. I own the tension, I own what I'm presenting and what I'm proposing, I own that. I can still move it along until the objection round. The objection round is where things get kind of fun because this is where the team can actually start to affect my proposal. Because now we go around the room and everybody says, I object on this ground or this grounds and whatever, right? But for an objection has to pass a validity test. Not everybody can say, I want to do, not everybody can object.
You can't object because you don't like it.
Right.
It has to pass the test.
It has to be a valid, you can object because you don't like it.
It won't pass the
But
test.
it's not going to pass, it's not going to pass the validity test. And there's these different checks. Right, and you have to pass all the checks for it to be a valid objection. If it does pass the checks, right, that's a valid objection, and the objector and the proposer now have to get together and integrate their two things. The proposal must be updated so that the objector is satisfied, and the proposal does not go forward until the objector is satisfied. So the two of them kind of have to sort it out, and the facilitator facilitates this discussion. Other people can chime in with suggestions, but it's the proposer and the facilitator and the objector that say, okay, we're happy now, right? A couple of interesting points about the test. So the first one is, would it degrade the circle capacity? Would it degrade the circle in some way? So if somebody came up with a proposal, come up with this proposal to, hey, all the money we have in the bank, let's donate that to a worthy charity, right? We could do that. That sounds like a great thing, right? But, that is going to hurt the business. So, somebody could object and that would get tossed right out. Another one that's important is number 4 down here, is the objection has to come from your role. So I couldn't object at a role that I don't hold. So if I say, hey, I have this concern, but it's for Ashleigh's role, my objection would be tossed out, because maybe Ashleigh sees the objection, but she doesn't care. But that's her place to do it, not mine. So I can't object for anybody else. So if I raise an objection and it's not directly affecting one of my roles, the objection is disqualified. It doesn't pass the validity test, and the proposal can move forward. So it's actually proved to be a very effective process. Go ahead.
Is this all expected to happen within the scope of a single meeting, or is this something that can happen over the course of multiple meetings?
Well, this is a great question,
Because I all the time have a situation of someone proposes something, and 4 hours later, the next day after lunch, I realize here's this thing where that could be a terrible idea, or here's why this would work after all.
Great question.
I'm not thinking about it at the
Right,
time.
absolutely. So I presented a proposal that I want this accountability added to Ashleigh, right? And Ashleigh's like, yeah, that's fine, it's great. And then a day later, what was I thinking, right? So another great thing, so she can either wait till the next governance meeting, which ours is every 2 weeks, or she could say, talk to the secretary and call a governance meeting right then, and within a couple of days it'll be scheduled. And she could say, I want this accountability gone. So she puts forth raises attention, puts forth another proposal. So things aren't set in stone. Things are malleable, right? So a couple days later, if you have this objection that you come up with, raise that as another tension to get it fixed, right?
So you would have something that goes back and forth multiple times for you, as opposed to, here's a proposal, think on it, we'll look at objections at the next meeting.
So generally what I've found to be best is whenever I have proposals that I think are kind of big, is I actually circulate my proposals amongst the team. I would create a Google Doc, I'll send it out, people comment, make sure, hey, people are aware of the changes coming, so I understand all the objections that we're going to have. Some, again, I might not, this is my idea, I don't like that idea, right? But ultimately we come to the team, everybody's seen it, everybody's heard it by that point. So it's just kind of, but you don't have to do that, right? And you could come find yourself with just a bunch of objections at that point that people will say, hey, let's, in the facility,
It kind of depends on how big your proposal is.
Yeah, right.
It can be something that's pretty sweeping and changes significant policies or roles or accountabilities, or it could be something quite small.
Right.
We actually have a process that we have adopted and we approved through governance, which allows asynchronous proposal acceptance. So we don't have to do all of our proposals within governance. They can be sent with the software that we use for our meetings. You can send a proposal to the team. Everybody gets an email, and you have 3 days to say, yeah, I'm cool with that, and accept it. Or you can say, no, I think we need a governance meeting. I have valid objections to this. We need to talk this out. So, you could propose, I think we all need unlimited vacation time, and probably that could go asynchronously, and everybody would be like, yeah, great.
Right. Except Michael would say no.
Yeah, and he would call a governance meeting.
Right.
So there's different ways of, kind of dealing with bigger proposals over a longer period of time, and with avoiding a lengthy governance meeting when it's a smaller proposal that you're sure everybody's going to.
Except by voice vote kind of thing, or
Yeah.
you want to call for, ask for a roll call.
Right,
Yeah.
right, exactly. I mean, one of the examples I have, right now, we've kind of grown since we started this over last year, and I think we're time for another circle. And it's kind of a big thing since we had this 5 circles, and that was a horrible experience. So I'm actually talking with folks and making sure they understand what that's going to mean to create this second circle before just presenting it to the government.
So that is kind of the short version of Holacracy. There's books on the topic. There's a lot more that you can learn about it if you're interested. But that does kind of cover the main aspects of it, the different roles, circles, how the roles work, and the different meetings that are all part of this organizational structure. So it is definitely something that we have found has many benefits for our company. We're very happy in hindsight that we have adopted this organizational structure. One of the things that we found is that it definitely has given our team a lot more autonomy. So now that everybody knows exactly, what their roles are, what the accountabilities are for those roles, and what everybody else's roles are and accountabilities, they kind of have a much clearer definition of kind of where the limits are of what they should be doing and what is expected of them from other team members. And the other thing is there's a lot of autonomy in that if something is not defined in a role or in an accountability already, and it's something that you see and that needs to be done, and you realize that it's totally okay for somebody to just pick it up and do it.
We're seeing a lot more contributions,
Yeah.
like that there isn't this question anymore that we were having.
Is it
before.
okay that I do that?
Is it okay? And I don't see anybody else doing it. There's no rules defined for it. I'm going to go do it. Right? There's a way, and you can act. You can move that forward. You can push that forward. And if other people have an issue with this, we have governance. Right? I don't have to go to my manager. I don't have to complain behind your back. I either go talk to you directly, or I take it back to governance and raise attention and say, hey, James is doing something. It's really kind of stepping on my toes, or it doesn't seem like it's defined right. You send a proposal, and you get the role defined or accountability added or something. There's ways to deal with this conflict, very clear ways, and I think that further empowers people to act because they know they're not stepping on other people's toes.
So that leads into we found that one of the other benefits is this preference for action. We would prefer that the partners in our company feel that they can act when they see that something needs to be done, or when they want to do something, that they act on it instead of not, because they're not sure if it's okay, or if they're going to get in trouble by a manager or something like that. We prefer to see action rather than inaction. We want it to get done, and even if we realize later that maybe shouldn't have happened quite that way, or maybe there should be a role that has that accountability of that thing that you did, we can fix that later. At least it got done, right?
And then just distributing the stress. It's no longer resting on one person's shoulders. Before, one of the concern issues Michael had, we didn't have any managers. Michael was pretty much kind of everybody's boss. So they were coming to him with little things, right? So now we've said, okay, we've got this partner relations person. They get a lot of questions. And we have this person over here, and they'll get questions about their role. And we've distributed things around and clearly defined things. So we shifted the stress around across the company.
How many people are in your company?
We're about 20 right now.
So
is there a size that this works better for, or
we're 20. I think if you're 2 or 3 people, you're going to have difficulty with many of this. There is probably a minimum. But Zappos, I don't know if you've heard Zappos management structure. They're 1,500 people. Medium, I think they just actually tossed Holacracy, but some of the same principles underlying the new structure that they're looking for, and I think they're 200, maybe 100. But yeah, I think you can work for a variety of sizes.
Just if you have 1,500 people in your company, you probably have lots of circles.
Not just one.
Yeah, not just one circle with 1,500 people in a tactical. So one of the things that we have realized, though, in our implementation is that Holacracy just isn't enough.
It's great for governance, it's great for day-to-day, it wasn't intended to do this, but as we kind of got our house in order, we started thinking, we got more questions, thinking around, what's the vision? What are we doing this for? What's the purpose of the company? What are we here for? What are we as a collection of people, a collection of partners doing this for? Holacracy is just not enough. So we came up with Sparkocracy. It is this collection of things, Holacracy. Open book management is another really interesting thing I would encourage you guys to look at. It's about creating transparency, financial transparency within your organization, as well as creating a sense of ownership and even potentially letting people buy into the company over the long haul. It's great for metrics and monitoring and things like that. It's been really like amped up our metrics reporting a lot. We're still in the process of implementing it. One of the concepts that I really like is the sense of a scoreboard. So every week we're reporting different critical numbers, and different people within the organization have responsibility for reporting on those numbers and explaining kind of what happened. You spend about 20% of your time reflecting on the previous week's progress, and then looking 80% to the next week to say, hey, this is what we're going to do next week for this critical number, and how we're going to drive this forward. And it actually, I think, open book management gives people data they need so that they can best prioritize their work and energize their goals. The last piece being vision and strategy, and this was like, who's responsible for defining our vision, what does our strategy look like, all this stuff. We actually ended up creating a super circle. I don't know if you saw in one of the previous slides, but we ended up creating a super circle called a board, and we put the responsibility on the board to kind of define the vision and strategy of the company. But those three things, these three things, three different levels, is really powerful stuff for creating a self-governing organization.
So,
any question?
I don't want to interrupt it. I don't want to disrupt your flow, but I had a question about basically where do the benefits and compensation fit into this? Especially as we look.
Let's come back to that.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's come back to that in just a second. This is an interesting question.
and questions is actually our next slide. We're going to this one. So for what Rick was saying about the vision, if that actually leads into kind of the lessons that we've learned after a little more than a year of doing this. So we didn't do it all right, as we kind of shared in our story. In hindsight, if we were to be, starting today with Holacracy, like here's this great thing, we're going to implement it, we would start first with the vision and with defining that, and really figuring out what our company wants to be, where we're going, what our vision is, what is that strategy around that, and then look at what are our circles and what are our roles and what are the other things that we need to put in place.
But ultimately, be willing to make mistakes. Like, be daring to your decisions. If you really want to be self-governing, figure out what the vision, where you're going, why you're doing it, and then accept mistakes. Also, accept mistakes of the people that are maybe at the forefront and driving it forward. Somebody who was at the forefront driving it forward and made a lot of mistakes. And I would appreciate it. I think they would too.
So then, accepting mistakes means also being willing to start over. If you're, in the process of implementing something like this and you realize, like, okay, we've kind of gone on a path where this is not working for our culture, for our structure, for our people, then you have to be okay with going back and finding a different path. There are different ways of implementing a self-organizing structure. There's not only one way, and so you have to be willing to learn from those mistakes that you will make and start over.
But keep going. I mean, as we saw back, back in July, August timeframe, we tossed it out, we started over. That was just a few months with our first implementation, right? Then Medium at Holacracy for 2 years. They're deciding it's not working for them for what they're after. I mean, they're still after a self-governing organization, but Holacracy just wasn't right for them. But they're staying on the path, they're keeping going, and I think that's critical to being successful.
Sorry, I was just trying to bring it back up and clicked to the next slide on accident. The last thing was just making sure to keep everybody involved.
At the right times.
Yeah.
Because too many cooks in the kitchen.
Yeah, when you're defining the vision, it's maybe best to not have like everybody's input on that. I mean, it's good to get input initially, kind of talk to everybody with the interviews that Rick did. That was great to find out what everybody wanted to be doing, what the company wasn't doing right, what it could do better. But then actually bringing all of that input into just defining, a vision, that needs to be done probably by a smaller group of people. So it's good to make sure that everybody is involved, but at the right time.
So you had a question about HR, right? So let's talk related a little bit about our experience with it, right? So I was really pushing us on moving forward and making mistakes, and so we could spend a lot of time thinking through all the details about what we needed, and then in the reboot with all the roles, I didn't define HR. It's actually kind of coming back to bite us in the butt. So, but as a result of that, right? We actually have tensions that are coming up about wanting to define vacation and wanting to define different things. And so everybody's kind of having this say because there is no person with that authority. So we're actually going to end up, I think, one of my proposals, we're just kind of busy and haven't been able to do it. One of the proposals would be to have like a benefits manager, somebody that has that domain of HR. The other thing that's actually come up quite a bit is hiring and firing. Who has authority to hire and fire? And really, like, another key point to Holacracy, what makes Holacracy work, I think, is that anything that's not defined falls on the lead link. So hiring and firing not being defined, like the lead link has that authority to say that. Now, good lead link is saying, okay, how do I distribute the authority? I've got a lot of other stuff I need to do. Lead link is almost supposed to be a secondary role, a part-time role. I need to distribute that. So we have a hiring policy that we put in place, and everybody has to follow the hiring policy. We're in the process of defining the firing policy, a termination policy. It's one that we don't want to use. Nobody wants to use it, right? But it's getting input. We're getting input from all the team and things like that.
But going back to the benefits question as well, even if we did have a defined role where somebody had the accountability to just decide what everybody's benefits were, if somebody else in the company is unhappy with that, that is a tension that can go through governance. Not necessarily unhappy with the fact that somebody gets to decide benefits and has a role, but they could be unhappy with one of the benefits that has been provided for, or so those are, there are ways of bringing that up and working through it as a company.
Does the open book management mean that everyone knows everyone's salary?
No.
So how is that variable?
What we do is we actually roll up salary into a single number. So we do see how much we are spending on salary. We do see how much we're spending on benefits. But we don't say, this person gets this much, this person gets this much. Salary is actually an interesting question that we're exploring too. Like, how do we decide with the new hire coming in, what do we offer them? And we have different ways of doing it now, but it's all just kind of a, look at what other companies are offering, try to see how much we can afford for this person, how big of an impact, kind of nebulous things. Groove, was it Groove or Buffer? Maybe it was Buffer. They have an interesting thing. They actually have something where everybody knows everybody else's salaries. And they have a salary formula. We're not sure we're going to go to the open salary format, but the idea of this salary formula is actually pretty intriguing, where it's just kind of standard. You eliminate negotiations, you try to pull people in based on the strength of your benefits and your culture, instead of salary. It's like, hey, this is our salary formula, this is where you come out at the end of it. It's an interesting idea when we haven't adopted yet, but it's definitely fascinating. Okay.
Do you find that making this work sort of depends on a certain set of personality traits that you have to kind of hire for? Another way of phrasing that is, do you have a problem with like defectors, people that are kind of naturally trying to fight for authority, and it kind of breaks down with certain individuals, and how do you?
That's a great question, and I don't think so. I mean, because we have a range of personalities. We have people that kind of take charge and just go off and like push on stuff, and then you have people that are quiet and kind of sit in the background, and whenever they really have a concern, they'll pipe up. But for the most part, they're fine. Really, I think the limiting factor to a lot of stuff is just the more authority you want to take on, the more work you have to do. People we'll put like, you want to be marketing and PR, you want to have a say in this, you want to say in that, you'll have accountabilities, and if you're not delivering on those accountabilities, then the tensions will get raised. And my role is lead link, I assign people roles, and if people aren't delivering on their roles, first step is coaching, trying to help them kind of do this, but if there's consistent failure to delivery, I also have authority to remove somebody from that role, right? So you might have something that you want to do, and it might be okay to kind of do it as undefined because the propensity for action, right? We want that, but at some point it will get defined. And then once it's defined as a role, then I have the lead link will then have the authority to either put you in it because you've been doing it, or put somebody else in it, right?
So that lead link is the person that could ultimately resolve,
right,
or at least stop them before they become a problem.
Yeah.
See their company.
Yeah. Because even if
some kind of status or something.
What's interesting is roles have this idea of coupling and what's the other one? It's programming concepts. Coupling. What was it?
Cohesion.
Yes, thank you. Coupling and cohesion, right? So you're actually you don't want to couple your roles together. I mean, you do kind of need a little bit, like, but a role should never have an accountability that you're getting approval from somebody else, right? That takes away your autonomy. Now, we have developers, we have a project manager. Developers take direction from the project manager, and we kind of bake that in there. That's kind of skirting the edges a little bit, but they're not like the project manager isn't sitting there telling them how to work. So whenever we're building a role, we're trying to make sure that two roles don't overlap. Now, purposes are a bit broad, so you can, like, occasionally they do a little bit, but for the most part, I think culturally, if you hire, and maybe this is kind of your point, like if you hire people who like each other, who want to work with each other, we're looking for certain competencies, like the soft skills, that they'll work it out amongst themselves. They'll figure out, like, this is how we do it.
How does this, I don't want to say how does this work, but how does it overlap with where, you're not a co-op, so some of the people in the company are owners of the company and some
Right.
aren't?
Great
How does
question.
feel?
That is a great question. It's actually one of the things that we liked about Open Book. So the natural extension of Open Book management is that you're actually giving people the ability to buy in to the company, become owners of the company. Now that's like kind of the last step in Open Book management, and even Holacracy. So you have Holacracy, the Constitution, right? Think of it as Drupal. Then they have apps that you can like adopt on top of the Constitution. And one of them is like a partner framework, just like that, where people can buy in into the company too. So it's kind of baked in there. So right now,
You kind of mutate into a co-op at that point.
well, there you could be a co-op, there's ESOPs, there's like any number of ways that you could do this to structure it, but the idea, the natural, I think, evolution of this idea is that there is opportunity for the team, for it to be kind of a team-run organization, if that person wants it, because you could also have employees that, you know, I just want to work here, right? I just want to do this, and other people want to have kind of that kind of role. Did I answer your question?
Yeah.
Maybe else?
Are your slides going to be available?
I hope so.
Is Blue Spark is not a remote company?
Yes, we
Yeah.
are. We're 100% distributed.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes?
I'm just curious if there's a particular business need or objective that kind of restructuring the organization of the company was meant to address. Like, if there's some
It's a great question.
factor to
Yeah.
start all this.
So really, like, so, yeah, I mean, our founder was kind of the one doing all the administrative work as well as doing all the sales, and all kind of falling on him was, you know, I went and I did my thing, and Ashleigh was doing her thing, and everybody was kind of doing all this stuff. There's all this stuff falling between the cracks, and no real way, like, he was trying to get somebody to take on some of that responsibility, but nobody wanted to. Like, yeah, no, plus I'm billable, and, you know, I don't want to do that, right? So he didn't want to be the kind of person that said, hey, here, you're going to do this now, right? So that, I mean, there was really kind of this need where we were hitting this point where he just couldn't manage all this stuff himself at scale. Like, it was just, how do you scale? And so there was something special about the organization. We did have managers. Title was user experience director. I think we had a technical director. But, you know, it was kind of in name only, right? We were telling them, we were telling the developers what project to work on, and there were best practices, but it was all very much like this community, and trying to figure out how to scale this. That wasn't going to scale. It was more anarchy than anything. It just wasn't going to scale. So we needed a more formal structure, and that was really the business need. There wasn't any marketplace. This has no marketplace benefit, really. It's going to give us. Now I think we're all pretty confident that we can scale this. I mean, like, we've added, since we started, we were 12, 13 people. We've grown to 20, and it's working really well. And we see like we're going to do it for more. There's still a lot of work for us to do here and implementing these different pieces, but we're seeing definitely, yeah, we're feeling really good that this is going to scale for a bit.
Are there any particular types of companies or types of markets or that were able to work especially well or not work so well?
That's a good question.
Product company versus service company, small versus large, easy versus not. What kind of things would say this is the idea, what's the bad idea?
That's a good question. I mean, small, I think 2 or 3 people is not going to work.
Yeah. But because it's really just an organizational structure, and you then kind of define what goes in that structure, I think that it can be applied to pretty much any type of company, because you're going to define the circles that are needed for that company and the different roles that need to go into them and the accountabilities that go into them. There's a lot of definition that happens when you first, implement it. So I think that, the structure can be applied pretty much anywhere.
So what kind of roles, or what kind of circles would you have once you get to actively multiple systems? The original six didn't work out.
Yeah, so maybe you have an HR circle, right? It's typically HR, something that's benefits, making sure that all of your, hiring, in charge of hiring, firing, making sure everybody's happy. Maybe
We're working on, right now, the next circle I think we're looking at is a professional services circle. So we take all of our roles that are billable and putting them into a single circle. And that would exclude our account management, sales and marketing, HR, all that stuff. And it would actually be a large chunk of the company going into the circle. But I think, the benefits I see from doing that now is like efficiency and focus on project work, rather than having to sit there and listen to our sales guy give us reporting and things like that. And they have ways that circles talk to each other. So it's not like, hey, you guys go do this thing and you're completely oblivious to all this other stuff.
that you have representatives that will pass information from one circle to another. But if we were to expand into products, maybe let's say we have 3 products, maybe each product would have its own circle then as well, with people who are fulfilling different roles within that. So you could, within each product circle, you could have somebody who's doing finance, who's doing marketing for that product, who's doing the project management, whatever. You can have the same roles in multiple circles, but that are just acting within the needs of that circle. Yeah.
What's interesting too about this, especially why you start small, like Zappos, whenever they adopted it, they started with one department. It's like, okay, you guys are going to do this experiment, and for us, we were biting out too much with 6. Let's do 1. Now that we kind of have a handle on it, and we're seeing how the company's growing and the direction we're headed in, we have a better understanding of the types of circles we need. Right? I think before you saw we had a development and a user experience, we had these kind of discipline type of circles that would never have worked in a million years. So now it's okay, maybe a professional services circle is the right answer for us, right? So we can, and now we also, I think, have this experimental mentality, having gone through this a bit and seeing roles created and pulled back, and we kind of get used to that. So we say, okay, let's do the professional services circle, and we let that go for 2 months, and then Ashleigh comes back, or somebody says, this isn't working, and here's why, and they process retention, and go back to one circle. And it's fine. Just keep going. Adapt, it's agile. Other questions? Awesome.
All right.
Thanks, everybody.
So one other thing, just in case anybody here is interested or knows anybody, we are looking to hire. So that's one word that we're trying to get out while we're here at MidCamp. And if anybody does still have questions, we're going to be here all weekend and happy to talk about our experience. So thank you.
Thanks, everybody.